Yeah, I was having a little bit of a problem with my camera again. So I'm not going to be on camera for long. Just to say hello to everybody and thank you for joining us this evening. Well, it's this evening in South Africa, so it might be another time for you. And yeah, I think it's just time to just sort of center ourselves. I've had quite a hectic day. I don't know what's happening with the energies today, so hopefully it's not everybody and just me. But we'll start off as usual with our opening meditation, and I'm going to switch my camera off now. And just lovely to see everyone. Thank you. So while I'm doing that, just make yourself really comfortable and just start breathing. Okay. So as you're just settling into your seat in front of your computer, you can just rest your eyes on this image, this beautiful image that I found of a scarlet-chested sunbird. And I chose this because they're quite rare to see and to sight. And there's been two moments which they've appeared quite obviously in my day. And one was just the other day, and it really gave me beautiful hope in my own garden. And it was just a beautiful sort of confirmation that I was doing the right thing and the right people were around me at the time. So, and then I've seen them also up at the White Lion Trust. And I remember one day arriving there and feeling very sort of fragile, I suppose, and very in need of quiet space and time. And it was just before a big group was arriving. And this little bird sat outside my window of my little rondavel, singing away and chirping away. And it was just a real, again, once a beautiful reassurance. So without further ado, I'm just connecting in with that joy of the sunbirds in all their different forms. Take a deep breath in and slowly breathe out. You can close your eyes. And as you breathe in those beautiful particles of light, of sunshine, which the sunbird represents. And then breathe out any heaviness, any darkness that might be weighing you down. Just breathe it out. And feel that heaviness transform into light, into lightness. Feel any anger or fear that you may be carrying transformed into joy and love. Those soft, beautiful energies of love, respect, and joy. And then just breathe in that energy of light. And while you're there, take your focus down into your heart space. And feel that absolute love, that unconditional love filling your heart up, that unconditional love that you have for nature, for all beings. And then send that love out. And as you send that out, it's almost like you're breathing with your heart. Your heart is a set of lungs. You're breathing out that love which connects you with all the other beings. And as you breathe in, you're breathing in that love, those particles of sunlight. And it's an exchange of energy, it's an exchange of love. And this is the bridge of love and light through which our communications flow through the species. Feel yourself connected with every being in the universe. There is no separation. Feel yourself connect with the people, the human beings that are on this call this evening, and those who will be watching this tomorrow or the next day or sometime in the future. And feel that beautiful golden light that's filling you up, now surrounding you and surrounding the group in all corners of the world and including all nature beings. And feel safe and sure in this space as we continue with our talk this evening. And on that note, take another deep breath in, slowly breathe out. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. So, this evening we are talking about messages from nature, sort of spontaneous messages from nature, I should say, when we unexpectedly encounter a nature being who has a message for us. And this is slightly different to the webinars that I've done before, where it's really focusing on the communication of specific animals and specific reasons why you'd communicate in a specific way. But this really is slightly lighter, although some of the messages that we get from nature are obviously very, very serious. But what I want to just go through, I know every single day we come across animals or insects or maybe even plants as well that will speak to us just by their mere presence. So what I'd like to just point out is how we can really start listening to nature and being more conscious and aware of what nature is telling us and how we can be guided by nature, because of course we are all connected, as I expressed in the meditation. And because we're all connected, nature can mirror us. Nature knows what we're going through. And nature will often send us little messages of encouragement when we're on the right path, when we're on the same wavelength. So just to get to those points, it's really, if you can get into the practice of being conscious and aware of who is around you, when you wake up and open a window, look outside, see who's even in the room with you. It might be a fly, it might be a butterfly, a spider. Just take note of all the nature beings that we live with every moment of every day. And sometimes when we're in our own world and we aren't terribly conscious of, we're wrapped up with things and we're distracted, nature will come and, poke us on the shoulder really and say, "Oi, I'm here. Watch me, listen to me." And we've got a few stories about that this evening as well, which I'll share with you. When you do become conscious of who's around you, just be aware of how their presence makes you feel. So is it just something light and fluffy, or is it something more serious? Does it remind you of someone or of a situation? Just feel into why that animal has come out to be in your conscious presence. And also how they're behaving and what they're doing. Are they just relaxed and behaving normally, or are they doing something a bit strange and unexpected? Because that in itself can be a message, really showing you on the physical that you need to take note. Okay. So when you have become aware of this being, always take time to go into that heart space and send that unconditional love to the being with no expectations, and just a gratitude, a thank you for showing up, thank you for being there. Even if it might be an uncomfortable space, it might be something that you're a bit scared of. There's a message behind that as well, which we'll go into. I say here, listen with your heart. And if those of you, some of you are my students, some of you have just experienced a little bit of communicating with other species. Listen with your heart. That is what it's all about. Not with your head, not with your thoughts, but really go into your heart and what you feel and what you sense when you are in the presence of that being. Of course, you might get a little voice in your head. You might actually get a message as words. You might just get a feeling. Other images of a situation might flash into your mind. That's the basics of receiving messages from the animals. And always trust that message. Nature knows what they're doing. Nature knows what they're saying. And as long as you're in that centered, beautiful path and listening with your heart, know that that message is pure and you can trust that. And then, of course, always thank the messenger. That's a given. Always thank the animal after you've had an encounter with them. It doesn't even matter what the encounter is, even if it's a scary encounter with something like a baboon, if you're living in the Cape, an animal that you might be afraid of, or a spider. A lot of people are afraid of spider, or even a mosquito. The irritating mosquito can be bringing you a message. So always take note of a being in whatever form they come to you. They do have a message. Okay. Just to recap, trust your own feeling about the message. That's important. But you can also, there's a lot of writing and research being done on the traditional and spiritual meanings around animals that go back to ancient times, ancestral knowledge. So you can do some research. There's loads of different, at the end of the webinar, I'll share a few resources that that are my go-to resources. But it's also important to take what resonates with you about that situation, because you are personal. Your experience is completely personal to you. This life experience is personal to you. So what is a general understanding might not even resonate with you at that time. So always take your own perspective of the message. I hope that makes sense. Listen to the message, take note of it, don't just ignore it and think, oh, well, that's very nice to know, but I think I'm going to do my own thing anyway. Listen to it. If it came to you, it's something to consider. And then lastly, to really take strength from the support that nature is providing you. And I find that every day, even if I remember just being in the garden and deciding to just clear some weeds and I was creating a little safe space for the ashes of two of my dogs. And I had noticed that I hadn't seen the particular birds that day, which always came to visit. And I thought, where are they? And I was feeling a little bit down. But the moment I started doing the work in the garden and creating that little safe, sacred space for my two dogs who had passed, they showed up, and in such a huge way. It was the Naisno in my little eco space in wilderness, and they three sort of flights in a row, so flybys as I call them, really in my face, being raucous, but they only appeared once I had got out of my sort of funk about my slight depression about not doing anything. And when I started working with nature, then they appeared. So that was just a little aside. And it was just things like that happen on a daily basis. So I'm going to share a few of my personal examples of life-changing things as well as just interesting things. One of the sort of messengers in my life is the robin. Now, here is two art. Sorry, my words aren't coming out as well as they usually do tonight. But there's these two pictures. On the left is the robin redbreast from Europe, which many people are aware of. And the one on the right is kind of the African counterpart, which is the Cape robin. Now, all throughout my life, and it probably came to my notice when I first moved over to England from South Africa in was 2002. And the robin was appearing to me whenever I was feeling, oh, am I doing the right thing? Or, they were just appearing and I just felt good, just made me feel good. And then when I came back to South Africa a few years later, the Cape robin almost took over and started appearing when I needed that little, no, you're doing okay, you're fine. But I also would love, Janine shared with me a story about a robin redbreast that she had just before the webinar, and I'd love her to share that story with you. So Janine, if you'd like to share that now, I think people would love that story.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. So it's about 5 years ago now. One of my dogs died quite unexpectedly, and he was quite young. And I would be able to sort of deal with the grief in a, accepting way. But I had found this very challenging, and I resisted going on the walk that we used to take. I had another dog at the time, but we used to walk to a different place, and so I'd taken her for a walk to our normal place. And while I was walking on the way back to the car, robin started hopping on the trees on the side of the path where we were walking. Each time we moved forward, the robin kept moving forward, and I just had this sneaking suspicion that this was actually somehow linked to Oliver, who was half Irish setter. So I linked him to the red-breasted robin. So then, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, I finally mustered up the courage to go to the forest where I used to walk Oliver. And as I was walking up there, I was absolutely sobbing my heart out, but I was determined to go up there and just to say goodbye in a sort of peaceful, sacred way. And I found a beautiful spot, and I sat down and I started to chant, and I don't remember what it was that I was chanting, but it was a mantra that had some meaning to me and gave me some comfort. And within just probably 2 minutes or something, I noticed a robin in the branches a little way away. And the more I chanted and connected to my heart, the robin started to jump closer and closer. And at one point, he was about 3 meters away, directly in my line of sight. And he just looked into my eyes. I just kept chanting, and he just looked into my eyes for about 5 minutes. And yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And I just knew that it was confirmation that Oliver was fine. I was still connected to him, and I remember it so, so clearly. Such a beautiful message from the robin.
Thank you, Janine. That is, that's when they come, I think, when the spirit of a being that we've loved really sends us messages through nature like that. I mean, more often than not, that is how they can communicate with us as well, from beyond, the curtain, the veil, so to speak. So thank you for that.
That's my pleasure.
Thank you. So I want to share a story about this little beetle, which in South Africa is known as the tok-tokkie. Now, the tok-tokkie, I grew up with, and I think we have a few South Africans on the call as well today, so you might remember this, that there was a cancer awareness campaign on TV, and it was someone dressed up as a tok-tokkie beetle and knocking on person's door and handing out leaflets on cancer awareness. So the tok-tokkie in my mind was always known as, sort of this little messenger associated with cancer. And in African tradition, the tok-tokkie, if the saying is, if a tok-tokkie knocks on your door, and I'll tell you the reason why this is so important, it means there's going to be a death in the family. So this is African tradition. Now, the tok-tokkie has a very hard carapace underneath its abdomen. And how they communicate with each other is that they knock on the ground. And so it's literally a knocking like that. And I had never, ever in my whole life experienced or actually even seen them knocking, and certainly not on my doorstep. But I was up at the White Lion Project, which is such a sacred space that, of course, things that nature is so obviously going to be able to send very definite messages to you there, or to me there, I should say. And it was just before my mom. Well, let me start from the beginning. My mother had been having all sorts of tests to find out what was wrong. And she had a big tumor, and everyone thought it was benign. And we were still waiting for the tests. And I think in my heart, I knew, and she knew, that it wasn't benign. And we were still waiting for the results of the test. And I had a very small group. This is quite early days. It was in 2009, going up to the Lions. And obviously I was quite worried about my mother. We were very, very close. And as I arrived at the kitchen door of the camp, there's this little tok-tokkie beetle, and it started knocking. And I thought, that's really strange. I picked it up and I took it out of the way so it didn't get trod on. And then I went to bed that night, and outside, and we have these little rondavel huts, little round huts that we stay in. And I was in the smaller one, and it's got a concrete step at the front door. And as I was going to sleep, I heard this knock, 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 knock. And there was this tok-tokkie beetle knocking at my door. And every night, I think that morning, it was knocking at my door again. And every single day, it was knocking right outside my door, not outside anyone else's door. And, of course, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the tok-tokkie beetle, the cancer awareness. And I just knew that this was the message, that I must prepare, that my mom is not going to survive this. And I knew deep in my heart, but we don't want to know these things sometimes. And it was completely clear to me from that message from the tok-tokkie. I've never seen a tok-tokkie there since. I might have seen it, but I certainly haven't heard it knocking, and certainly not outside my door. And that was 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago. And then related to that story, I just need to continue on the story with my mom and messages about her. When then she had, I think after the diagnosis, she lived another 2 months. And so she went down very, very rapidly. And during the time, maybe about 3 weeks before she actually died, these little monarch caterpillar, so it's the caterpillar of the monarch butterfly, started crawling up the walls of the house that we were staying in. It was me and my husband. My mom was living in her own place, and they started crawling, hundreds of them, around the white walls and forming their little pupas and their little chrysalises, and which was something I'd never ever seen before as well. And then the day my mom passed, they started emerging. I know this is just a beautiful picture I found on the internet, but they started emerging as these amazing monarch butterflies. And why this was really special, I just knew it was my mom, and the transformation. Obviously, butterflies represent transformation. So this is what it was all about. My mom, showing me that this is now life-changing. This is my mom's life is transforming. My life will be transforming, and on to the extra journey. And then just a little added message from that on my wedding day, because I wasn't married then, but I married my husband, and who my mom had met. And on my wedding day, I was wearing an African outfit of black and orange, very different wedding dress. And I was carrying a sunflower, and we got married in a field. I was walking with my uncle, my mom's brother, sort of down towards the altar. And this monarch butterfly came and landed on the sunflower and walked and stayed with me right until I was down at the altar, which the altar was actually between two oak trees. But, and I knew that was my mom, not just because it was a butterfly, but because she'd also chosen the monarch, which was a black and orange, to match my dress. And I just had to smile, because my mom would always make sure that clothes were matching, the matching handbag and the belt and the shoes, everything had to match. So of course she chose a butterfly that would match my dress. So that was just a sweet side story to that, but certainly a message from the other side there through nature. I'm not going to go, well, I'm going to tell one more story about the praying mantis now. And this also was something that happened quite recently. And just how an animal, even an animal as small as an insect can really give you courage throughout your life, and through really difficult times. And not just, the grieving times, but the slightly challenging times when you're in a situation where you're not quite sure how to deal with things. So this praying mantis, which I've always loved praying mantises as well, they represent the bushman's god, the creator in African tradition as well. So, and the praying mantis is always a reminder to be still and to go into prayer or to meditation in whatever situation you find yourself. And for a few days, almost every day when I was out in the garden, a praying mantis landed on me. 3 days in a row, this happened. And it was just before I was going on to a wildlife retreat, something that I hadn't organized. And it was completely out of my comfort zone. I had been asked to run a communication retreat, really, but I had been given no time to actually go into the teachings, and it was all very casual. Everyone was having fun, and I was really battling with this. On my way up, we stopped at a petrol station, and on the petrol station window, there was this huge praying mantis. It was actually a big stick insect, which is the same family of the mantis. And I picked it, big as my hand, and I picked it up and moved it to the tree so that it wouldn't get squished. And I thanked the mantis for the message, and I reminded myself, okay, you're going to have to be quiet and go still with this group and, just be in that space of prayer and meditation. And we were in the camp. It was a tented camp, so it was tents. If anyone knows, if you've been on African safari at all, they have these tented camps with, it sounds, a bit scary, just a tent, but it really wasn't. It was all secured on a concrete base and quite a large tent. And when I entered, this praying mantis was on the wall, and I opened up all the flaps and to invite her to leave, and she didn't leave. I was there for a week, and she stayed in my tent the whole time. And I was, I was becoming worried about her. Every time I'd go in, I'd check that she was there and if she was okay, and I'd invite her out and I'd thank her for her message. But I was also not really listening because I was being so distracted by the people and the what I was doing there, because I wasn't doing what I would have thought I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't able to lead them in meditation. I wasn't able to have space to share the communication, although that is what I was being paid to do so. People, actually, literally, people just weren't interested, if I had to be honest with myself. And it was quite a difficult thing for me to come to terms with. And then the moment I started letting that go, and maybe it was a bit ego-based, and just letting the fact that this is my thing and my feelings, I just had to let it go and just be centered and prayerful. Only then did she leave the tent, and that was only sort of the day before. So it had taken me quite a long time to actually listen to her message. But it was almost like nature knew that I was going to be in that space, because the praying mantis had been with me for a week before I arrived there as well. So it's really important to take note of when you see an animal more than once as well. And if you want to take this further, and this is where follow the animal communication guidelines. And if you don't know it, if you are new to my work, you can go onto my website, and all you need to do is sign up onto my newsletter, and you'll get a free document of just the step-by-step guide to communicating with animals, how to actually connect in with these beings with your heart, and how to receive the messages and how to trust them in various different ways. So really it is important work, even though it does seem a little bit or fluffy on some level, but it's
Wynter,
beautiful. It is.
we're just missing. I think you're dropping out a little bit.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. What did you miss?
Just heard you saying about going onto the website, but then after that, signing up for the newsletter, but after that, it cut out a bit.
Okay, all right. Maybe I was waffling a bit. Is this better? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I've just moved a little bit closer. Okay, so I'll move on to this picture of a leopard was also quite an interesting message for us. I was with a colleague of mine, again at the White Line Trust, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd just gone into town to pick up some supplies, and we were driving back on what is known as the Guernsey Road, which is the main sort of thoroughfare. You can see it's a sand road. And, not like a highway, but there's a bit of traffic on that road. In the middle of the day, this leopard just appeared out of nowhere, this female leopard. And Lee, my friend that I was with, just managed to get this photograph of her. Now, in African tradition, and certainly with the project that I work with the White Lion Trust, the ancestors, and especially ancestors of the medicine people. So when a medicine woman or man dies, they come back in the form of usually one of the big cats, a lion or a leopard. And Maria, who is the one that worked, who was Linda Tucker's mentor, if you follow that work, of Linda, of the Mysteries of the White Lions is the book that she wrote. And she explains how Maria was the Lion Queen of Africa. And she's an integral part of the sort of spiritual side of the project. And this wasn't a specific, there was no specific message on at this particular time, but we knew that it was an important acknowledgement that the work that we were about to do, and it was actually the first time that Lee, my friend who I've known for a long time, and she had started volunteering and working for the trust, we're doing something together. And she has gone on to become a trustee of the Linda Tucker Foundation. Is doing really important work for the trust. So it was almost an acknowledgement of the work that we'd been doing together, and the future, that it was an important important combination, as I should say, for want of anything else to describe it as. Okay. So now we come to the messages around fear. So, and of course, most people are a little bit afraid of snakes. Now, these two pictures, the one on the left is a puff adder, which is one of the most dangerous snakes in Africa, but not dangerous because they attack you, but dangerous because they freeze. Normally when they hear you coming, and many people will not see them and accidentally step on them and then get bitten. And they are highly poisonous. And then the one on the right is a black mamba, which is known to be the most deadly of snakes in South Africa or in Africa. And I've got a story about the black mamba, which was really, really interesting as well. And again, it was up at the White Lion Trust. And I was with some sound healers and the group, and we were going to visit a piece of land that had very, very heavy energy on it. A lot of historical stuff had happened on that land, ancestral things. And it wasn't our intention at the time, but what we were decided to do is do a sound, not even a sound healing or a sound clearing, just a sound symphony, and to try and lighten the energy, or to lighten the energy, not to try, and to bring in some positive energy and light and love into that space. And it happened to be raining incredibly hard, and we couldn't really go out and see the other animals, but so we decided to stay in, and there was a sliding door into a patio and then another sliding door into the room that we were in. And as the sound symphony was starting, one of the women looked out and she said, "Oh, there's a snake." And I got up, and there was this black mamba who'd come into the patio area. And she must have been nearly 2 meters long. I do get very long. And she was literally dancing up the walls. It was the most incredible thing to see. She was dancing up the walls. And of course, those who knew what she was suddenly got into a bit of a panic. And I just calmly said, okay, let's just close the door. So we closed the sliding door. And I guided everyone just to be very still and be thankful for her presence, be grateful to her for her assistance, because what the black mamba does in African medicine is help clear negative energy. So she knew exactly what she was doing there and exactly what we were doing there. So she came to assist us. Once we had acknowledged her and thanked her, she slid out again and went off into the bushveld. And that was such a powerful message. And, you know, something that we really, really took to heart, that nature is supporting us, that nature listens and works with us when we do work for nature. And when we're on the right path, the right wavelength, when we are being these light workers, I suppose, light beings along with nature, because nature is all light. And there's a balance, obviously there's a balance, but many times and at times in this Earth's history, things have been out of balance. And right now things are very out of balance. And when we are connecting with nature, when we're communicating with nature, when we're listening to nature and acting on their messages, that means that we are correcting the balance. So that was a great, great message from this particular snake. And Janine, I know you've got a story as well, about a snake, which I'd like you to share again, please, if you
Absolutely.
could.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. Yes, so it was actually also at the White Lions, but a different piece of land. It was during the first White Lion Leadership Academy in 2012, and it was a very special occasion because we were the first group to join the academy, and half of the participants had no real idea why they were there. They would just felt called to be there, and they followed their path. And the other half of us knew what had led us there, but no idea where it would lead on to. And so we had many different subjects. It was 6 weeks in total. We had quite a few different subjects. It was roughly one a week, including animal communication with Wynter. But one of the weeks we were focusing on culture and cross cultures, and we recorded everyone's dreams. It's referred to as dream work. And that was what we did for the week. And we recorded the dreams in detail. And it was actually, I mean, it's the first time I'd done anything like that. So it was actually startling how everyone was dreaming different versions, but of the same thing. So as you can imagine, being in South Africa, a lot of animals were in the dreams, but it was very often the same dreams, especially white animals. And of course, many people dreamed of snakes. And on the last day of the workshop, of this dream workshop, and even though it was winter and snakes would normally be in hibernation, a small snake had come out onto the main footpath. It had turned and fatally bit itself on the tail. And I mean, you couldn't miss this snake. And Wynter, you said that it was the symbol. What was the symbol?
It's the Ouroboros, which is the symbol of the snake biting its own tail. And that represents the cycle of nature. If anyone's familiar with that, it sometimes is in a figure of 8, but it's the life cycle of nature and everything being in balance, and the cycle of life and death. So,
Yeah.
to me, I wasn't there at the time, but I know, that that was what it was representing. And immediately it came to me. So, and I'm sure you all worked massively around that, Janine, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for some of us, it was our first time doing anything like this. And it was, Linda was the one who found the snake, and she picked it up and put it on the altar. And she began to talk about, what it represented. And, for everyone there, even though some of us didn't really know what we were going to do with this experience, we just knew it was absolute confirmation and validation that we were in the right place. And not only were we seen by nature, but that nature could actually speak to us and give us messages. And we were in absolute awe of that experience.
And also the fact that the snake actually, died, bringing you that message, which is also makes it even more important,
Yeah.
sacrificing his body. And obviously his spirit was not sacrificed, but his body for the work, which is in itself incredible. So another thing I wanted to just saying messages around fear. I don't know if any of you have a phobia about animals, a particular animal, but I remember there was one young scientist that was working at the trust who was absolutely terrified of snakes. He dreamt of snakes. He encountered them almost on a daily basis. He even would get into his bed and there'd be a snake in there. He'd had that experience. I mean, none of us have ever had that experience at the trust, but because he was so fearful, he was confronted with his fear on virtually a daily basis. And of course, in a place where there are quite a few snakes in the middle of the African bushveld. And, certainly in summer when they're not hibernating. And that really is when you are confronted with something that you are afraid of, that is an invitation to address those fears. It's an invitation to connect with that animal and really find out the consciousness, the essence of that animal, of that being, and find out why you might be so terrified of them. It might be a childish thing, it might be an ancestral thing, it might be a past life thing. See why you are so fearful. And that brings me, just remembering that brought me to another experience with someone who I had on a group, and it was the very first group I ever brought to the Lions, and let's just say I learned how not to do things with them, and we were, the trust wasn't really ready to host groups, but we made a good effort. And one of the women was terrified of caterpillars and worms and anything sort of creepy crawly like that. And she was in quite a nice little room with a mosquito net, sharing with someone else. And she came to wake me up in the middle of the night. I was in the sort of main house section. And she said, I can't sleep there. I can't sleep there. The net was just completely covered with caterpillars. And so I said, okay, well, don't worry. You sleep in my room. I don't see any caterpillars here, and I'll go and sleep in your room, which I did. I'd been there for 5 minutes, the caterpillars had just disappeared. There wasn't one caterpillar on the mosquito net for me. So that was something that I haven't seen her for a while, but I don't think she's addressed even yet. So there will always be those opportunities to address those fears. And if you don't take it up, they'll come again and again and again. And one of the ways of working with, I mean, I do whole workshops around fears, but one of the ways, if you're fearful of a particular animal, some people have such a phobia that they can't even look at a picture of a spider or a bird. Some people are even terrified of birds. Look at the photograph, on a logical level, really have a photograph of the animal that you're scared with and start connecting in with your heart and see what comes. And I know a lot of people who have addressed their fears and overcome their fears that way. Of course, there's all the unreal fears in life as well, which is not so easy, not as easy to address, I should say, by just looking at them in a photograph. Okay. So really, those are all the stories that I wanted to share, but I've just typed up a few basic spiritual meanings that I know of with some of the animals that we do come across. Butterfly, obviously, transformation, a bee working together, as well as the creation of honey and wealth and nutrition and things like that. Purity, praying mantis, I've spoken about. The robin also represents the Christ energy, which is an interesting thing, that when a robin appears, everything feels like you are supported. So that's an interesting traditional meaning of the robin as well. Snake, healing and protection. And of course, the black mamba actually removing negative energy. So that's the healing part of the snake. And of course, we know that the medical sign always has a snake, the staff, and the snake around it. An eagle, broadening your perspective, having a bird's eye view. A guinea fowl. And I don't know if you know, guinea fowls they're not as common as they used to be in South Africa. But guinea and gold. So when you see groups of guinea fowls, it's always a good sign that you won't be poverty stricken, and you do have wealth. The baboon, that's an interesting animal as well, and very misunderstood, especially here in South Africa. And as some of you may know, I work very closely with baboons here. And in the African tradition, if a baboon moves through your village, you need to leave them alone, because they are the medicine men and they are healing and removing bad energy, negative energy, and negative entities. So that's the purpose of the baboon in ancestral tradition. The hyena as well, because the hyena moves in both worlds. They live underground, or they sleep underground, I should say, and then they move about at night. And really, their message is about bringing any darkness into the light. So anything that is secret or malicious and undercover, they will expose. So their presence is very, very important. When you hear the hyenas call at night, you know that they are helping to clear as well, bringing the darkness into the light to expose any corruption. They're also scavengers, and they clean up the bones, something that vultures do as well. Vultures are the cleansers of the bush. And of course, just the lions, which is my sort of totem animal, if you want to call it, my animal guide, my family, represent family in African tradition. They represent pride and working together as a family and ancestral. So those are just a very few. Obviously, there's books and books on this subject. The books that I trust the most, and I've always my go-to books are usually the Ted Andrews books, which most of you would probably be familiar with. Animal Wise and Animal Speak are his most useful that I've found. And of course, it's more Native American tradition that he refers to, as opposed to the African tradition. But usually there are animals that, have an African cousin that you can relate to. So I highly recommend those two books. There's loads and loads of decks of cards that you can find, these oracle cards or medicine cards. But the Animal Medicine Cards by David Carson and Jamie Sams they're probably the ones that have been around the longest and are with the most integrity, I think. Well, I should say, not I think. And then, of course, I have to mention the White Lion leadership cards, which is messages from the lions as opposed from the whole range of species. But those are probably the most accurate cards that I've ever worked with. So, but of course, you will find, you can do a Google search, of course, and find out the, traditional spiritual meanings of an animal. But always remember to see if it resonates with you. If you have a dream about an animal, that's another way that nature brings us messages. Be aware of your dreams, because they are also very powerful, because we're in a different state when we're sleeping and when we're dreaming, and normally much more open to messages than when we are working along in our daily lives. And so that is a way that nature can bring messages into us. So that's also another whole subject, but it also ties in with the interspecies communication. And please remember that, interspecies communication is a spiritual journey. And once you start getting into that space of communicating with other species and working with your intuition and connecting into the divine, into source, which is what we do when we are communicating and connecting with nature and the animals, even if it's a pet hamster, we are connecting to the source. And that in itself is a divine journey. It is a spiritual journey. And although there's very, very practical aspects to interspecies communication, there is this sort of higher aspect of it where we can listen to messages of a divine source, rather than just the practical messages of what your cat or dog likes to eat. Not that that's not important as well, it's all linked, and there's nothing more important than anything else. So, but I think that's what this webinar was about, to really connecting in with nature on a higher level, on a spiritual level, and noticing how those messages manifest in the physical. So I hope that all makes sense. Okay, so I think we've got some time for questions, if anyone has any. So, Janine, do you want to put the Q&A on, and or you can type them in the chat. I don't know which is easier.
Do you want me to enable the chat as well, or just a Q&A?
I think maybe just the Q&A.
Okay.
Then.
Yeah, it's up. So it's next to chat, just says Q&A.
Okay. All right. If anybody wants to type in a question, please do so, or share something. There's nothing coming now. There's not that many people on the call, so we could actually open up the mics if someone wants to speak and say something verbally. We can just unblock your mic, and if you can put your hand up. Okay, there's a question from Laura. So something similar to the woman afraid of caterpillars happened to me at Sao. One night I got swarmed by ants during my sleep, and at the time I was getting quite frustrated, to be honest, because I wasn't really getting anything, messages or anything, and my long-held beliefs were crumbling down. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Wynter. You were literally bugged by frustration, and then you got bugged. So that is nature mirroring your frustration. And how do you deal with ants swarming up onto your bed? That must have been very, very irritating, but not necessarily dangerous. So yeah, well done for getting that message as well. I'm hoping it only happened one night and not it didn't continue once you kind of realized what was going on. Okay. Is there anyone else? Nicoletta, what about species that for some reasons are not appearing anymore? This year I noticed very few swallows. Yes, Nicoletta, I think that's also a message, a very important message when they're not there. And that shows us what is happening, really shows us what is happening to the planet. And there are fewer species, there are fewer animals, like individuals of the species around as well. So we're not noticing them as well. You know, with climate change and everything else, patterns are differing. So that in itself is a message. And what we can do then, if you're concerned about it, connect in with the swallows, connect in with that swallow consciousness, and ask what's going on and how you can help. I hope that helps with that answer. Okay. Aldine, fear of snakes. So Aldine, that's what I was saying. You fear any interaction with snakes in order to make you understand them better. Then you don't need to interact with them. Go work with a photograph. So find a photograph of a snake that you can, bear looking at, and start connecting in with that snake energy and find out what she is saying to you. And then perhaps when you do come across a snake in real life, in reality, your perception will be different, and you won't be so afraid. And actually, if you are confronting that fear through a photograph and communicating with and getting the message, then you probably won't need to deal with an interaction at all. So I hope that makes sense. And Laura's just answered, yes, it was just the one night with her aunts. She had to clear that frustration, accept it for what it was. So thank you and well done to that. Okay. And Christine, you had a dream of a city that was only black and white until a hummingbird arrived and everything transformed into color. Well, that's wonderful. And, it sounds I can visualize that dream. And it seemed like the city had only buildings and no nature. And perhaps the hummingbird was just bringing light and color into it. And that's a beautiful, uplifting message that we need to, bring nature back to transform ourselves. And Alice, many interactions with the hawk. Recently, one called your attention, a Cooper's hawk who had caught a small rabbit, and you watched him or her eat it, and watched again eating the same rabbit the next day. Any ideas of the meaning? Alice, it will be meaningful for you in your situation, I think. I've had similar things with my chickens and a hawk. And I've had to really come to terms with what the hawk was saying about my environment, as well as about the general laws of the environment. So, just off the top of my head, that would have to be about sort of being strong enough to identify what you need and being successful in hunting and nourishing yourself. So it would be, especially if your focus was on the hawk and not on the rabbit. So that I'd see that as a positive message for you. But you might, think into it, connect in with the hawk and see what comes as well. Thank you for that, Alice. Okay. Paula just saying thank you about the question about the swallows, because she's seeing so few birds at the moment. Yes, it is a big thing right now. Gail, a lot of roaches in your house this season. Kitchen, bathroom. I want to put down tomatoes to kill them, but what other advice do you have? Normally, you've told them that they're welcome outside, but not inside. Normally that is very much a sort of symbol of something that needs cleaning out, and whether that is on an energetic level. I mean, the most obvious thing is on a physical level, to keep your sort of kitchen and bathroom clean, which I'm very sure it is, because this is on a different level. So it might just be to do some energetic clearing in the house. Sometimes, and I know you do clearing all the time, Gail, but maybe it's something that you've missed. So maybe it's something that you haven't put your attention to. But otherwise, just thank them for bringing that, whatever it is, to your attention once you've put your finger on it, and then ask them to please vacate and find someone else to send their messages to. And I'm sure they will, once you've realized what's going on there. Okay. Thank you. Wonderful, Gail. So you say, yes, you're clearing out your website shelves, business offerings. Guess they are reminding you to get it finished and done. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Any feelings about nature and animal companions working together? Absolutely. I mean, they definitely can work together. I'm not sure. You must be thinking about a specific incident or incidents. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is how dogs and baboons can actually live harmoniously, as long as you help facilitate that, because so many people are so terrified of baboons. The dogs pick that up and are trying to protect the house, so then they start attacking the baboons, and then either the baboon or the dog gets seriously hurt. Whereas when the people are calm about it, and then the dogs are calm about it, and then the baboons aren't bothered at all. So that is just an example of a companion animal and a wild animal working together. So I'm not sure if that is what you were getting at, Christine. Elizabeth just wanted to say this topic is so helpful right now, getting lots of messages from nature, partly because we've been spending a lot of meditative time outside. So thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I know your work with the whales and the dolphins and the sea beings is so important. And of course, the elephants that you've worked so closely with. So thank you. I'm glad it's helping. Sandy, you derive great pleasure from visiting the home base of the butterflies on the nature trail you walk every day. They come and show themselves and sometimes sit on my arm or hand for a few minutes. Transformation is the message, but I want the connection every day, and I'm working on not being disappointed if they don't want to land on me. One butterfly appeared over a period of time with its wings tattered more each time, until it was amazing that it could still fly. Oh gosh, I'm losing it. Sorry, losing the message. So it could still fly to come and sit on my hand. Gratitude for appearing and acknowledging my greetings. Is it okay to ask for connection? It is okay, Sandy, but I think it's really important to let go of the need and the expectation. So when you're just in that stillness and accepting that whoever comes, and just get on and do the work that you're supposed to be doing, then it's the great gift when they do appear. But if you're in a sort of place of need, then that's sometimes not such a easy place for nature to be with you in. So try and let that need go, and then just see the magic happen. Okay. Okay. So Janine, some years ago, I faced a situation I've been avoiding because I was so afraid of it, so brave, and went through the experience with complete presence. Next morning, you woke up, looked out of the lounge room, level with the lounge room was a beautiful white-tailed sea eagle. Eagles have been a sign for me that I've transformed something important in my life. Wonderful, Janine. And I remember you, when I first met you all those years ago, you were working with birds of prey, and that's why you come to England. So yeah, the eagles have been with you for a long time. So that's beautiful. Thank you for that. Christine walked by the lake in the morning and saw 3 animals in short space, a kingfisher and a bat in the daytime. Thank you for this webinar. Lovely to be in community with kindred spirits. Thank you, Christine, and thank you for sharing. Kingfisher is such a beautiful bird as well. I love them. And that's also very important messages. So, and yeah, a gorgeous butterfly or dragon got into the house and desperately trying to get out. I intuitively knew that I had to commit to my own transformation to be able to help it out. Once I made this determined commitment, I'd be very able to help them out the right way. Very powerful, and it felt transformative. So I'm assuming you did that, and the butterfly or dragonfly managed to get out the moment you. That's wonderful. That's a lovely story, Anya. Thank you. And yes, they really come to test us sometimes, and so yeah, don't take nature lightly. I know none of you that are here, I mean, you wouldn't be here if you did on this call, but yeah, just be conscious of those beautiful messages that nature has for us and how she can help us through tough times and celebrate with us in the good times as well. Alice, do you feel that animals experience similar messages from nature? It depends, I think. Domestic animals, I always think of animals as part of nature, so the domestic animals who live solely with us have kind of tuned into our way of being on some level, so they're not, perhaps not as connected as the wild animals. But to me, I feel animals are listening to nature all the time, and all animals and this collective consciousness, and it's because we don't listen that nature has to bring these messages to us in such an obvious way. So what we are doing now is learning to be more connected to nature. I mean, we're part of nature as well. We're not separate. So I think if we were completely connected in every way to nature, we would just be working with her, communicating with her all the time, and not have to be woken up with these messages. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's it. So thank you for all those beautiful sharings and messages. Nicoletta, you have to leave. Thank you. I'm going to do the closing meditation just shortly. If you want to stay for that, Nicoletta, it'll only be a couple of minutes. But otherwise, just, yeah, thank you for being here. Remember to center and breathe and ground yourself when you go. Okay. All right. So on that note, let's just, again, feel yourself relax. Let go of all those questions in your mind and the answers and all the thoughts that this talk has brought up for you. Take a deep breath in, slowly breathe out, and just feel that wonderful connection, that magical connection that we have with all beings. Remember the opening meditation where you went into your heart and felt that bridge of communication opening up, that unconditional love flowing from nature to you and you to nature. And feel the joy and celebration of nature. Really feel it. And for those of you who've noticed that nature isn't around you as much, invite nature back. Ask the swallows to come back. Create safe spaces for them, even if it's only on an energetic level. Create that space with love in your heart, visualizing them coming back. Visualize the safe spaces for them, the open fields, the trees. Visualize people opening their hearts and receiving nature back into their lives. Visualize the bees returning. The bees are disappearing because of human practices. There are many people creating safe spaces, so invite those animals, those birds, those insects back into those safe spaces. And even on an energy level, if you can't do it on a physical level, help to create those safe spaces for nature in physical reality. So visualize it and see it on every level, even if it's just pot plants or herb gardens on your balcony, or if it's a great big acres of field that you can contribute to. See it and feel it and know that this is happening, and this can only expand as long as we hold that vision. Take a deep breath in, feel the gratitude and love filling you up. Take your focus down to your feet, to the ground your feet is resting upon. Feel the earth that carries you. Feel connected to the earth and connected to the stars at the same time. Keep grounded and do the work. Carry on listening to Mother Nature and all her children, and know that you are on the right path and that you are making a difference. Just focus on your breath, focus on your body. You can move about a bit, stamp your feet, wiggle your toes, feel grounded, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. It was an interesting subject for me, and interesting to talk about it in a slightly different way. And yes, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here with me. And thank you to Janine as well for holding the space so beautifully, as you always do.
It's always my pleasure, my honor to be here.
And just a reminder, if you haven't seen it already, I've created an event on Big Marker as well for Friday evening around the lion situation in South Africa. So a global meditation and prayer for lions, for the freedom of lions. So if you go onto Big Marker and become a channel member if you're not a channel member already, but you can see the way to register and what it's all about. So please join me and Linda Tucker on that online event and prayer meditation. It'll only be about half an hour long, 5 o'clock South Africa time on Friday the 31st. So just a reminder of that. Thank you so much for all your support and all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynter.
Bye for now. Until next time.
Bye for now. Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Yes, so thank you everyone, as Wynter said, for joining live, and for those who are listening to the recording afterwards, adding to this beautiful energetic family of kindred spirits. It's such an honor and privilege to be a part of. I'm wishing you all a wonderful afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. And see you on Friday. Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for sharing yours as well. Okay.